Hey, this is Matt from Alpha Analyst, and welcome to this new video on graphs and charts in Microsoft Excel. In this video, we're going to cover some great ways to put together some easy to produce graphs, and we're going to cover bar charts, line charts, pie charts, and after you're done watching this video, you'll have a much better understanding of how to create all of these. All right, let's get started. So here we have some data in a table, and sometimes the data that we have isn't really in the best format to create a graph. So for example, here we have names of people, and here we have some data fields such as salary and bonus. We typically would want the two to be next to each other when we create a graph. So down here you can see that I pulled together some of the fields that were more relevant, such as the name field, the salary field, as well as the years of experience field. So now that these things that we want to graph are next to each other, it's much easier to graph them. So to create a line graph, let's talk about what to do. So the first step, as we kind of alluded to earlier, is to first just pull out the specific fields that we want to graph. So in the line graph, we want to have name and salary and bonus. I put the years of experience here just to make it more understandable. So here's the thought process. Everything else being equal, you would think that typically people with more years of experience might be compensated more than people with less years of experience. So let's graph the data to see if that's true in this situation. So we have the people's names right here in this column. We have their salary and bonus in this column. And we use the years of experience column simply to sort the data so that we know that Timothy has the smallest number of years of experience and Greg over here has the greatest number. So let's highlight the data, and we're going to include the column headings as we do this. So we're not just going to highlight the data from Timothy down. We're actually going to highlight name, salary, and bonus and highlight this all the way down to the 191 for Greg. After that's highlighted, we want to go to the Insert tab. And on the Insert tab, we're going to come over here to this icon, which is for the line or area chart. So you click on the drop-down box, and this one right here is probably a good one for us to select. It has little dots that show each data point. So after we click on it, you can see that it gave us a graph down here. Okay, I'm just going to make it smaller. Okay, so this graph here, it shows that Timothy, who's making $74,000, who has the lowest amount of experience, he's making less money than Greg over here, who has the most amount of experience. And you can see that it's not a perfect correlation, but you can see that it is a pretty strong trend that overall, as people have more years of experience, they tend to be making more as far as salary and bonus. So this is a great way to create a line chart to be able to analyze our data. Let's go down here and talk about bar charts. So here we have different levels of education, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhD, and people's names as well as their salary and bonus. Here's a cool thing you can do as you create bar charts. So let's merge these cells here. So I'm simply highlighting where it says bachelor's, and I'm right clicking and choosing merge and center. The error message just was asking us if we really wanted to merge them, so I selected yes. Okay, so after doing that, we have a section that says bachelor's, a section that says master's, and a section that says PhD. So if you highlight this whole section, so we're going to include the column headings, as well as these new sections that we just created, and the names and the data, we can create a really cool bar chart. And when we do this, we want the category headings to be on the left and the name in the data to be on the right. So we wouldn't want it to be reversed. For example, we would not want this category to be on the right. So you want the categories to be on the left, and then each individual data point here, and then the data here on the right. So once you have that all set up, you can highlight that. And once again, we are highlighting the column headings. So we're highlighting from education over to salary and bonus and all the way down. Once we have that, come over here to the Insert tab, and we're going to select this option here for a bar chart. And let's go with the first option. I'm going to make the graph a little bit smaller. Okay, so from this graph you can see that it was able to create a separate section for us for people with bachelor's degrees, people with master's degrees, as well as people with PhDs. These groupings that we created on the left were able to be reflected in the graph. So here you can quickly see who has a bachelor's degree versus a master's degree versus a PhD. And if it looks like people with a master's degree might be being compensated less, that could be due to other factors such as certifications, years of experience, things like that. If you come down here to this last section on pie charts, let's talk about how to create a pie chart. Similar to the other ones above, we're going to highlight the column headings and then come down here to the bottom. And then on the insert menu, we're going to come over to the pie chart icon. So once again, the insert menu, and then come over here to the icon that looks like a pie chart, and we're going to click this first option. So here it shows the total amount of salary and bonus that the company is paying to people with various levels of education. So as we have these different types of graphs here, let's talk about how we can make them more understandable. So if you right click on this line graph right here, you'll see that a shortcut menu pops up. So in the shortcut menu, you can click on this thing that says add data labels. After you do that, you'll see that all of these salaries popped up. So it's up to you if you really want to see this data, but it is available to you. So if you want these data points to show up in your graph, you can add the data points, and then it makes it much easier to see the specifics of the data that you're looking at. Another thing that you might want to do is to change the way that it looks. So do you see how it's kind of a light blue color, it's kind of plain, it doesn't really look all that special? So what could we do to make the color pop? How could we make this look a little bit nicer? Okay, one thing we can do is right click on it, and then we can choose Format Data Series. So all we did was we right clicked on the line graph, and then we chose Format Data Series. Over here on the right, you'll see that we have different options. So let's come over to the paint bucket. And on the paint bucket, we have the option to select what we want the line color to look like. So that's not these dots here. The line color is what connects the dots. Let's have that be a red color. Okay, so now it's dark red. And let's change what the bullets look like. So if we come over here to marker, we can come over to marker options, and we can select built-in, and we want to, let's say, have it be a square. Instead of circles, we can do squares for this one. And then when it says the fill, let's change the color to black. So we'll do a solid fill, and we'll have it be black. So now you have a black square and a red line. And let's say we want the border to be a different color. Let's say we want the border to be red. We can make this red. So let's recap what we did. So we right-clicked on the graph, and then we chose, and specifically we right-clicked on the line graph. So not just the graph in general, but we right-clicked on the actual line graph. We came down, selected Format Data Series, and then we came to the paint bucket. And then to change the color of the line, we changed it up here. We said we wanted a solid line as compared to something else. We were able to choose the color, and if we wanted to, we could change the width. So we can make it larger. And if you notice, as I'm changing the width to make it larger, you'll see that the graph is becoming relatively thick. And you can have it be thinner. You really can choose whichever size matches what you're looking for. And once you're finished with that, you can come over to where it says marker over here. And then the fill, that basically refers to this thing right here. So this little dot that shows up at each data point. So if you want it to be a different color, if you didn't want it to be black, you wanted it to be, let's say, light blue, you could click that and make it light blue. And then over here for the border basically talks about on the outside of that little icon. So if you want that to be, let's say, green, you can have that outside be green. If you want to make the width of the border bigger, you can change the width here. And as you make the border bigger, you can see that the border becomes more and more prominent. Okay, so that's how you can make some adjustments to line graphs. Let's come down here and talk about other updates that we can make to graphs as we format them. Okay, so do you see over here on the left how it says salary $250,000? We probably don't need these extra zeros at the end, just because this is all in thousands of dollars. So let's talk about what we could do to make this graph easier to read. We could right-click here and choose Format Axis. And over here on the Format Axis, you'll see that we have different options. If it's not selected by default, let's select this icon on the far right that looks like a graph. If you come down here next to where it says Display Units, right now it says none. So we could change that to say thousands. And after we did that, you can see that the extra zeros disappeared. This makes it easier for us to make the graph a little bit bigger so it's easier to read. So we're able to use more of our graph real estate for the actual graph itself as compared to data that we don't necessarily need. So now that we have that laid out, how can we make this graph pop a little bit? So we could right-click the title, and we can make the font size a little bit bigger or bolder. So we can come to edit text. And when you want to edit text, a great way to do that is to come over here to where it says text options. And you can basically change the color. We can make the title, we can make it red. If you want to make other adjustments, you can actually highlight the text, right click, and you can choose a wide variety of different options. If you come to font, you can decide if you want to make it bold. You can make it much larger. It's really up to you how you want this to look. And then when you're finished, the title, as you can see, it pops out a little bit more. So the graph, let's say that we wanted the bars to look a little bit different. How would we do that? We could right click on them, and then we could come to fill and change that to, let's do this color of blue, light blue. Okay. If we wanted the text to look different on the headings, here's what we can do. We can highlight the text, and similar to what we did to the title, we could decide to change the font to, let's say, a different color. We can make the style, let's say, bold. We can change it from 10 font to 12. We can just come through here and make whichever adjustments we like. Now let's take a look at the pie chart as far as what we could do to this chart to make it easier to understand and easier to read. So right now you can see that there's a blue section that corresponds to the total amount that was paid to people with bachelor's degrees, the total paid to people with master's degrees, as well as PhDs. We could take the pie chart and right click on it, and then come down here to where it says add data labels. After we do that, you can see that the total amount paid to each of these three categories now shows up. Now that these data points are here, let's right click on one of them and come down here to choose Format Data Labels. On the right side here, if it's not selected already, click on this icon here that says Label Options. So you'll see that the value item is checked, and that corresponds to the total amount of money paid to each of these three segments. Let's say we want the actual category name to show up, so we want it to actually say which one corresponds to bachelor's. We can click on category name, and then you can see here that in this label, it actually says which section was PhDs versus bachelor's. And because it says it on the pie chart, now we actually don't really need this key down here at the bottom. So we can click on it and delete it. And now you have the bachelor's, master's, and PhDs that are standalone. So you don't need that key anymore. And we have space now, because the key is gone, we have space to make the graph somewhat larger. And we can click on the data labels and do Control B to make it bolder, or on the home menu, you can come up here and change the font to make it easier to read. So now that we have the labels for each of these sections of the pie chart, it's much easier to see which portion corresponds to each section without having to go down to the key to read it. We can actually just look directly at the pie chart itself to be able to figure out what corresponds to each section of the pie chart. All right, so now we've covered how to take the data set that you're starting with and pull out the pieces that you're actually going to graph. So this right here, this is the data that we used to graph the line graph, the bar graph, as well as the pie chart. We talked about how to make adjustments to the formatting of the graph after you create it, including changing the colors, changing the size, how to format the axis so you have more space for the graph. And we also touched on pie charts, including how to improve the labeling of the pie charts so that you don't need to have a key and you can have more space for the actual graph inside of the pie chart. And with respect to pie charts, we also covered how to add additional labels to the pie chart. So for example, saying which category corresponds to each section so that you have more space for the pie chart so it can be larger and you don't require the person looking at the graph to have to go to the key to see what each section is. So after you watch this video, I hope you have a much better understanding of how to use graphs and charts in Microsoft Excel. Thanks for watching.